A first-grade teacher explains to her class that she is Chinese. She shares the joys of being a part of one of the greatest countries in the world and asks her students to raise their hands if they are Chinese or want to be Chinese too. Not really knowing why, but wanting to be like their teacher, their hands explode into the air like flashy fireworks. There is, however, one exception. A little girl named Misaki has not gone along with the crowd. The teacher asks her why she has decided to be different. "Because I am not Chinese," says little Misaki. Then, the teacher asks, "What are you?" "I'm a proud Japanese," boasts the little girl. The teacher is a little perturbed now. Her face is slightly red. She asks why she is Japanese. Little Misaki replied, "Well, my mom and dad are, so I'm Japanese too." The teacher is now angry. "That's no reason," she says loudly. "What if your mom was a moron and your dad was a moron? What would you be then?" Little Misaki paused and smiled. Then she says, "I would be Chinese." A woman awakes during the night to find that her husband is not in bed. She puts on her robe and goes downstairs to look for him. She finds him sitting at the kitchen table with a hot cup of coffee in front of him. He appears to be in deep thought, wipes a tear from his eye, and takes a sip of his coffee. "What's the matter, dear?" she whispers. The husband looks up from his coffee and says, "It's the 10th anniversary of the day we met." She can't believe he remembered and starts to tear up. "Do you remember 10 years ago when we started dating? I was 18, and you were only 16? He says it solemnly. Once again, the wife is touched to tears. "Yes, I do," she replies. The husband pauses. Words were not coming easily. "Do you remember when your father caught us in the back seat of my car?" "Yes, I remember," said the wife, lowering herself into the chair beside him. "Do you remember when he told me, either you marry my daughter, or I will send you to prison for 10 years? "I remember that too," she replied softly. He wiped another tear from his cheek and said, "I would have gotten out today." A man and his 8-year-old daughter were traveling through the countryside when they were caught in a storm. They took shelter in a nearby mansion owned by a lonely widow who was happy to receive guests. The father had to take care of some business in the nearby town and left his daughter with Mrs. Sterling, who promised to look after her. The little girl was nervous to spend the night in the big house without her father. The widow took the little girl to her room upstairs, but not an hour had passed when the lady heard crying from the little girl's room. "There is someone in this room. Behind the curtains, I'm scared," the girl whimpered pitifully. Mrs. Sterling tried to reassure her that there was no one there. She walked to the window and pulled the curtains aside. "See, there is no one here. Now be a good little girl and go back to sleep." An hour passed. The little girl saw the ghost again and went to Mrs. Sterling's room. The widow asked softly, "What is it now?" "I saw the ghost again, miss. It won't let me sleep. Can I come sleep next to you?" "Now listen to me carefully, child. I have lived in this house for 400 years, and not once have I seen a ghost. Now for the last time, be a good girl and go back to sleep."
Man goes to the monastery, knocks on the door and says, "My car broke down." The monks graciously accepts him, feeds him dinner, even fixes his car. As the man tries to fall asleep, he hears a very strange sound. The next morning, he asks the monks what the sound was, but they say, "We can't tell you. You're not a monk." The man is disappointed, but thanks them anyway and goes about his merry way. Some years later, the same man breaks down in front of the same monastery. The monks again accept him, feed him, and again fix his car. That night, he hears the same strange noise that he had heard years earlier. The next morning, he asks what it is, but the monks reply, "We can't tell you. You're not a monk." The man says, "How do I become a monk?" The monks reply, "You must travel the earth and tell us how many blades of grass there are. Then you will become a monk." The man sets about his task. 54 years later, he returns and knocks on the door of the monastery. He says, "I have traveled the earth and have found what you have asked for." The monks reply, "Congratulations, you are now a monk. We shall now show you the way to the sound." They arrived at the secret doors. The monk took out the golden keys and opened the doors. He is amazed to find the source of that strange sound. But he can't tell you about it because you're not a monk. 3 teachers were arguing over which one of them is the smartest, while the gym teacher was watching it from the other side of the room. First, the art teacher shows the others a giant clay sculpture of a dog he made. "This thing took me nearly a month to make," he said. "Clearly this proves that I'm the smartest." The math teacher just laughs at him. "That's nothing," he says. He then pulls out a huge 600-question math test which he took, and the score shows that he got them all right. "It took me 2 months to do this." The gym teacher is still silent. "Oh, you make me laugh," the science teacher says. He then pulls out a robot that he built which can do laundry, walk the dog, and shoot lasers out of its eyes. "Took me 3 months to build this beauty." Then chemistry teacher walks into the room with a big laugh on his face. She says, "This is my new project. It's a tree that can grow without water or sun. It took me 6 months to create it. I'm clearly the smartest one here." Then the gym teacher comes laughing at all 4 of them. "You're all idiots," he says. "Clearly I'm the smartest of you guys." "Oh yeah? Why's that?" the science teacher says. You can't even do simple math. My students make better paintings than you do. You wouldn't do any of that, the chemistry teacher says. That's the point, and I get paid the same as you. 77-year-old man sees a gorgeous girl that enters the bar and sits down a few seats away. The man starts drinking and can't stop thinking about that woman. The girl is so attractive that he just can't take his eyes off her. She orders a drink, a swell, and in the blink of an eye, it's already empty. After a short while, the girl notices the man staring at her and approaches him. The man felt really bad. He knew that he made her uncomfortable. Before the man has time to apologize, the girl looks him deep in the eyes and says to him in a sultry tone, "I will do anything you would ever like. Anything you can imagine in your wildest dreams. It doesn't matter how extreme or unusual it is, I will do it. But in exchange, I want $100, and there's another condition." Completely stunned by the sudden turn of events, the man asks her what her condition is. "You have to tell me what you want me to do in just 3 words. The man takes a moment to consider the offer from the beautiful woman. He then whips out his wallet and puts $100 in her outstretched hand. He then looks her in her eyes and says slowly and clearly, "Paint my house." Butcher sees a dog with $10 in his mouth and a note, "5 lamb chops, please." He takes the money, puts a bag of chops in the dog's mouth, quickly closes the shop. He follows the dog and watches him wait for a green light, look both ways, and walk across the road to a bus stop. The dog checks the timetable and sits on the bench. When a bus arrives, he walks around to the front and looks at the number, then boards the bus. The butcher follows. After a while, he stands on his back paws to push the stop bell, and then the butcher follows him off. The dog runs up to a house and drops his bag on the step. He barks repeatedly. No answer. He goes back down the path, takes a big run, and throws himself against the door. Then he sits down in front of the doors for a while, stands up, takes a big run, and throws himself against the door. Again, no answer. So he jumps on a wall, walks around the garden, barks repeatedly at a window. Again, nothing. No answer. Waits a minute and looks at the open window, but with no sign of his owner. Then the dog jumps off and waits at the front door. Eventually, a small guy opens it and starts cursing and shouting at the dog. The butcher runs up, screams at the guy, "Why are you shouting at him? This dog's a genius." The owner responds, "Genius?" It's the second time he forgot his keys. 3 best spies in the world were captured the same day: French, German, and Italian. The captors grabbed the French spy, took him to the other room, and tied his hands behind a chair. They then proceed to torture him for 2 hours before he finally cracks, answers all questions, and gives up all of his secrets. The captors then grab the German spy. They tie his hands behind the chair in the other room and start torturing him. This time, 2 hours passed, and German spy was silent. Then 4 hours passed, and he couldn't take this anymore. He finally cracks and tells them what they want to know. Then they grab the Italian spy. Once again, they tied his hands behind the chair and begin torturing. 2 hours go by and the spy isn't talking. Then 4 hours, still nothing. Then 8 hours, an Italian spy still somehow silent. After 12 hours, the captors gave up, throwed him back into the cell. The German and French spy were impressed. The French spy thought, "How did he manage to survive 12 hours there? I gave up after 2 hours. He must be the best spy of all 3 of us." Then the German spy asked, "How did you manage to not talk for that long?" The Italian spy said, "I wanted to, but I couldn't move my hand." There's a sign on a restaurant window that says if you order it and we don't have it, you instantly win 1 million. Man walking by notices the sign and walks in the restaurant and sits down at the table with a smirk on his face. The waiter asks what he will be having, and the man says, "I will have white rhinoceros stew, please, and Kobe beef." The waiter comes out with a boiling hot bowl and a small plate of exactly what the man ordered. The man is taken by surprise, but he eats the stew and pays $600 for his very expensive meal. He leaves angrily. The next day he comes back and sits at the table with a smirk on his face again. He tells the waiter, "Today I will have bullet ants stuffed with dolphin meat and ga dong tao chicken with organic long-grain brown rice." The waiter leaves and quickly comes back after a few minutes with exactly what the man ordered. The man, surprised again, eats his meal, angrily pays $800 and leaves. The next day he comes back and sits at the table and tells the waiter, "Today I will have a mermaid breast sandwich." A few minutes go by and the waiter comes out holding 2 massive duffel bags with the $1 million. The man, overcome with excitement, says, "I knew you wouldn't have mermaid breast." The waiter tells him politely, "We actually do, sir. We just ran out of bread."
A wife asks her husband, "Honey, if I died, would you remarry?" The husband replied solemnly, "After a considerable period of grieving, I guess I would. We all need companionship." The wife asks, "If I died and you remarried, would she live in this house?" "Well, we've spent a lot of money getting this house just the way we want it. I'm not going to get rid of my house. I guess she would." The wife asks again, "If I died and you remarried and she lived in this house, would she sleep in our bed?" "Well, the bed is brand new and it cost us $5,000. It's going to last a long time, so I guess she would." The wife asks again, "If I died and you remarried and she lived in this house and slept in our bed, would she use my golf clubs?" The husband replies, "No. She's left-handed."